1 week on from the Arma 2.0 showcase, which went down surprisingly well, I'm delighted to say Starbreeze have again trusted me to release a video on the early access build of an update without spoiling every single surprise coming to the game. Today, we're taking a look at the Party Powder Heist, the new paid DLC heist available in Update 14, and the first to come to the game in almost 6 months. Those months of development have led to it arriving with an expansive loud and stealth experience, modelled after the objective freedom that is the loot sandbox of Diamond District. What it lacks in inspired objectives, it makes up for in its unique layout and visual design, bringing some genuine grit and atmosphere to a Payday heist for the first time in a very long time. It's also trying its absolute hardest to incorporate RNG where it can, but shackled by the bait lighting of Payday 3, this is often limited to loot placement, entering via door A or B, and small variations in where objective progressors such as keycards are located. However, it's still an endeavour I can get behind, especially when it extends to genuinely fluid guard patrols and varied loot secure locations, which can change how you want to play it. Whilst a lot of the enjoyment you'll get out of this heist comes from learning the intricacies of its layout and loot spawns, there is something to be said for its feel and concept, going back to something more Payday-like at its core. There's a low-stakes classic element to it that I think some will enjoy, although it's not lost on me that its simplicity is a double-edged sword, as it could just as easily be boiled down to opening up 3 bland warehouse buildings with little fanfare. It's also rough around the edges in places that feel tough to forgive when it's the first heist of the year and we're already deep into May. As you can imagine from that intro, I have a fair few thoughts regarding Party Powder, so let's dive into what you can expect from the most Payday 3 of heists come May 26th. The narrative, as with many of the side hustles, is fairly straightforward, although at this point it's getting tricky to know what the definition of a side job even is. My take is that this Italian mob storyline was intended to be a full-on Year 2 campaign, just like Bad Apple, but has ended up abridged after all the season pass uncertainty and Plyon publishing question marks. Basically, as we learned from Locke at the end of First World Bank, the mob was using that location to launder money for their operations, so they've been after us ever since we put an incidental end to it. It just so happens that the now named Palatucci mob also have corrupt cops working with them, and using those cops they've shut down the Golden Dagger Triad's coke facility situated in a packing plant on the outskirts of the city. Shio is pissed, so with a mutual enemy in sight, has decided to contact the Payday gang to retrieve her gear, whilst we get the honour of sending a message to the mob. Classic stuff really, any excuse to raid a few warehouses downtown for white stuff and whatever else we can find. Yes, that includes what I assume is Shahu's cash, which we're quietly taking as our own. Taken as a loud heist, your approach is incredibly straightforward. You need to rush through warehouses filled with coke and other contraband, locate enough of the stuff to make the visit worthwhile, scaling with difficulty, load up the escape van, which will arrive once a certain quota is met, and flee. It really doesn't get more complicated than that. This is a heist with little to no pretense or set-piece snobbery, a proper back-to-basics experience that is what you make of it. Hell, there aren't even any civs on the map as standard, passively making this one of the tougher heists of late. In theory, you could complete this thing on lower difficulties in comfortably under 5 minutes without even seeing more than a third of the heist, which isn't great value for money when you remember this is a paid experience. However, if you take your time to explore everything it has to offer, it can turn into one of the longer experiences in the game, especially as you're learning how to approach it. To be clear, this heist is almost entirely non-linear. You have the complete freedom to go about it in any order, which makes my usual follow-along walkthrough commentary a little bit tricky to pull off. Essentially, the objectives can be placed into 3 categories. We have the infiltration objectives, including standard door drills, QR code and keycard locating, or even the classic thermite entrance. I'm absolutely amazed they've managed to hold themselves back from including the one other door opening objective template this game has, the Wi-Fi circles. Once inside the warehouse buildings, shipping crates or offices, the secondary objective opens up, a standard loot hunt. This can be as boring and uninspired as opening crates to find the Bolivian marching powder inside, or hacking a PC for codes to a drug lockup and combing through side rooms to locate meth ingredients. That of course means the third and final objective is turning those ingredients into the blue crystals, which whilst completely optional even on overkill, will contribute to the bulk of your playtime on this heist if you decide to interact with cooking, especially if you hold on to each batch for the pure blue stuff. Now, instead of there being a standardized ingredient order as there was for free cooking side objectives in Payday 2, you'll need to locate an instruction board within one of the other two warehouses, giving you the RNG seeds order. Keep in mind, spawns ramp quickly on this heist and you end up at a final charge faster than usual, so I'd recommend focusing on cooking as early as possible if that's your plan, to avoid doing so without an endless assault breathing down your neck. Once you've either secured all 19 bags or feel the need to flee earlier, Twitch will be waiting for pickup in what's a slightly uninspired standard van escape. Favors can provide a chopper escape for greater variety, but it's still a very simple loot-centric string of objectives. Whilst I like the variety of those objectives, I do have to point out that not a single one is original or particularly inspired, making this heist feel like Payday 3's greatest hits at times. I know this is a product of team size limitations and trying to create the best possible experience with the tools already at their disposal, but when you're asking people to spend their hard-earned money on an experience, I feel like you do need to offer at least something unique. For Party Powder, that fortunately comes in the form of its stellar map design. More so than any other heist in the game at the moment, its traversal, combat environments and spawns feel varied. All of the warehouses open up completely after being breached, offering new routes to explore, but also opening you up to newly created lines of sight. Cops will drop in from above, from under gates, over fences, and generally look to swarm from all directions instead of funneling one after another, as is the tendency on so many of the more interior-focused heists in the game. With how open-ended things are, you'll also find yourself moving around the heist more freely than usual, meaning the level designers have needed to be more creative in how they've set up spawns of units such as snipers and cloakers. Is this enough to make up for a lack of anything tangibly fresh and new? In my eyes, no. But I also understand this was the one area of freedom the design team likely had when creating the heist, so don't begrudge them at all for it. As far as functioning as a loud sandbox heist, it ticks most of my boxes, an almost proving grounds-esque experience for build testing under reasonable stress. If that's something you value paying for, I don't think you'll be disappointed, but it's tough to recommend for everyone else when we have the returning heists like First World Bank sitting there entirely for free with about 3 times as much depth and variety. Stealth has many of the same highs and shortcomings. That's partially because objectives really don't change at all depending on approach. Other than using QR codes and keycards instead of drills and thermite to enter the warehouses, once inside, the loot searching and securing process is virtually identical. Most egregious of all, you'll still be able to cook meth, which is just barely more engaging than waiting for jewelry to clean. You guys know how I feel about this. Stealth objectives need to be more active than loud ones because you don't have the constant that is combat to keep you occupied. And this meth cooking objective is a major offender, leading to that sit and wait gameplay I so despise. Which is a shame, because when the game forces you to move around and make greater use of its environment, you start to have a hell of a lot more fun. It's a mask-on, mostly secure area setup, meaning everything is designed around giving you options to evade the cops and outplay them. As I've mentioned, the play space is surprisingly atmospheric in its run-down crime scene feel, and your movement options on this one are a delight with far greater verticality than expected, allowing you to move around the heist with a shocking fluidity, which isn't always the case with Payday 3's noise-based stealth system in mind. That experience is also assisted by a decision to finally vary up guard and security room placements, meaning we won't just be learning how to avoid every cop on the heist. Instead, each run feels somewhat unique as you try to find which guards are carrying the key items you require, such as keycards and smartphones, at the same time as learning what zones of the heist are heavily patrolled and should be avoided. Oh, and there's always some entertainment found in locating which tiny bloody container the camera guard has locked himself in this time. It seems so obvious, but makes a world of difference for replayability, as does having diverse heist start and loot secure locations, meaning you'll need bespoke strategies for every van placement. Fair warning, after I suffered for it, what is a bit odd is once you open up the warehouse shutters, if the cops notice them, they will call in a perpetual search. Payday 3 is never consistent about what constitutes something suspicious, and this is a similarly inexplicable one, just limiting your options for moving around the heist. Overall, stealth feels like the way to go if you want to get the most out of this heist, as that's where the freeform design really excels. As for its reward, it seems roughly proportionate to the majority of the heists in the game in both approaches, although it doesn't quite compete with the likes of First World Bank. So to round off the pros and cons, this heist does what it can with a fairly limited playbook, highlighting that lack of dev resources at their disposal, but also clearly listening to prior feedback with its focus on player choice. That open layout, as well as improved RNG, is a notable step in the right direction. Obviously, sometimes it ends up manifesting in a PC moving 5 meters across the room, which isn't going to be enough to scratch the itch, but when it works, it does force you to be more aware of your surroundings and explore everything this visually intriguing map has to offer. Hell, in places, it had me wondering just how deep into the resource well they were going, and if they were reusing some of those impressive Overkill's The Walking Dead assets. Oh, and the music is once again outstanding. Back against the wall with no obvious theme to rely upon, Gustavo always seems to pull it out of the bag, and this track is no different. On the other side of the coin, this heist can also suffer from a lack of direction, with too great a dependence on locating highly specific items such as keycards. Their possible locations are something you'll learn on repeat playthroughs, but it can be a frustrating roadblock on initial attempts, and I think this is a prime example of just how inflexible Payday 3 tends to be. Once upon a time, with a better build and role-playing system, we could blast our way in, saw the door down, or picklock a side entrance. This, to me, is Payday 3's greatest crime and regression, killing an element of what made the franchise so unique. Sadly, this is on full display in Party Powder. Also on full display are cops randomly breaking on this map, spawning lobotomized in certain locations until you actively disturb them. They can also fall through the floor, and of course the crew AI can get stuck on the geometry, leading to these sorts of looping deaths. Then you have the issue of this container spawning with no guard inside, meaning endless cams if you roll into the specific RNG. Amusing enough and easily fixed, but not the polish I'd expect from a heist so long in development. Finally, I worry this new Mafia narrative is already at a dead end, with no interesting characters to drive the story forward. We know there's a second heist in development right now that will likely be paid, so I'm desperate for them to move the story forward in a way that actually grips me again, and makes me excited for more than just the gameplay. In conclusion, to me, Party Powder is a bit of a microcosm of all the good and bad within Payday 3. They've packed it all in there, with bugs, clunky mechanics, and a lukewarm story, contrasted by what is at times a genuinely gripping setting and open-ended gameplay loop that makes it feel worthwhile. I think stealth is a standout, and there's a lot that can be gleaned from what works here for future heists, especially regarding replayability and map design, but sadly, without doing too much wrong, I do feel like it's a regression from the highs of Fear and Greed and First World Bank. It goes without saying that Starbreeze have little choice but to charge for this heist, but it's difficult to justify any sort of price tag when it's so clearly shackled by development limitations that were of management's own making. You know, significantly reduced investment and all that. But of course, the flip side of waiting more than 3 months between each update is that when we finally get one, they're pretty sizable. That means we still have the generally excellent, if overpowered, Armor 2.0 to enjoy, alongside a myriad of positive balance changes for the harder difficulties, and a returning free weapon that I'm still sadly not at liberty to reveal. Stay tuned on the channel if you're keen to find out what that weapon could be, and let me know your thoughts on this heist from the gameplay you've been able to see. Thank you so much for watching. I massively appreciate the likes you've left on my recent Payday 3 coverage, and would be overjoyed if we could keep that up today. And of course, my range of Apex gaming PCs remain available to anyone still PC-less in these trying times for console fans. Take care, I'll see you all later this week. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.